Hello, I'm Brigham Avery. Welcome to Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark, the show where we get to know celebrity Cub fans from the entertainment world as we take you from Wrigley Field to the red carpet.
Today we welcome an original cast member from the hit musical Grease. Known for her work on Taxi, LA Story, and Dancing with the Stars. A best-selling author, Chicago native, and true blue Cubs fan, please welcome Marilu Henner.
So great to have you, Marilu. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. Anytime I can talk about Chicago, the Cubs, growing up in Chicago, anything, I love it. I'm there.
When did you remember, that's going to be a big theme on this show, what was your first memory of being a Cub fan and the Chicago Cubs? Okay,
so I grew up on Logan Boulevard. The Kennedy Expressway just missed demolishing my house because it was like the next door neighbors, you know, at the end of the block, we were the last block. We were so close to the Kennedy Expressway that every time a big truck rolled by, our television station our TV would automatically turn to WGN.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not kidding you.
Yes.
It's like a big truck. Channel 9.
It was meant to be.
There we were. You know, Garfield Goose, Fraser Thomas, all of them. So the Cubs games were on Channel 9.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't even tell you, because this is even before I was like conscious. I mean, I do remember my baptism, but I don't remember the specific day that I first saw my first Cubs game on television, because you know, the family was obsessed with the Cubs. We didn't live that far from Wrigley Field. So when we were kids, our father would take us, and you know, and my brothers, my brother Lauren was so obsessed with the Cubs. He was there, he told me, the first time that they put the nets up to protect the players, because the people in the bleachers used to throw their drinks down. My niece Lizzie was there. She said it was 8/8/88.
Oh yeah,
where the first night game, but it was rained out.
That's right.
That's what she said.
Yep.
So I was brought up with the Cubs. And in fact, my father, who worked for, he was the kind of person who worked, he was in the automobile business. So he worked for Ford Motor Company or for Chevrolet. He worked at Nicky Chevrolet. He worked at Z Frank. And he was the kind of guy who used to come in as a general manager and build the place up and give them ideas. So Ron Santo and Ernie Banks would go there sometimes on like a Sunday if they weren't playing a game and sign things, and he'd get them on the phone with us, or we'd go to his office and things like that. So it was really, you know, I grew up with the Cubs, like a real Chicago girl. When they won the pennant, when they won the World Series in 2016, I was doing Dancing with the Stars, so we all watched it on television. But that Christmas, everybody got Cubs pajamas.
What was your first memory of Wrigley Field? Who took you? And I've always wanted to ask this of a guest, Marilu. Was the ivy in bloom when you first went to Wrigley Field? Or was it April and freezing?
Well, you know, in Chicago, you can also be June and freezing.
Well, yeah.
And, you know, they always say, like, you know, in 5 minutes, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. I went with a bunch of girlfriends when I was in 8th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like right around in June and everything else.
So it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day.
Beautiful day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite Cub growing up? Do you have an all-time favorite
Oh,
Cub?
well, Ernie Banks. You know, I mean, it had to be Ernie Banks. And my sister Crystal's pride and joy was the fact that on her 10th birthday, which was September 27th, 1964, Ernie Banks hit his 10th Grand Slam home run.
So growing up, your family owned a dance studio in Chicago,
Yes,
right?
in our backyard. Well, it was a 3-car garage that was, not a 3-car, 2-car garage, barely 2-car garage, converted into a dancing school. It was a fake door. It had a fake door on it, so we never used it as a garage. But my mother always wanted to be a dance teacher. So she and my sister, who was, I guess she was 14 at the time, they started the school. It started in our basement, but then when I was 13, it was turned into a dance studio. We had 200 students between the ages of 2 and 80. Including the nuns who came over for stretch classes.
How wonderful.
Because we lived right next door to St. John Berkman's, which was right on the boulevard. So my mother would teach them dancing. And then she also ran a beauty shop out of our kitchen with about 25 women from the neighborhood who would come over to get their hair done. And the house always smelled like perm solution. The refrigerator was in the basement, and in its place in the kitchen was this blue hair drying chair. So, you know, that's how it was. And then my uncle, my mother's younger brother, lived upstairs with 10 cats, 2 dogs, 2 birds, a skunk, 150 fish, and his boyfriend, Charles.
Unbelievable.
And he taught art at the Catholic Grammar School next door, had art classes going on after school, while the dancing school was going on, while the beauty shop was going on, and he was also the neighborhood astrologist, and he ran a cat hospital on our roof. So I grew up, typical Chicago fashion, entrepreneurial mother, sales guy dad, and
I love it.
A real neighborhood kind of family.
Right. You were in the original live production of Grease in Chicago.
Yes.
And what I found out that's interesting about that is it's very customized. The original show is very Chicago, and then the movie with John Travolta is very California, so they kind of changed the essence of it.
Well, it went through so many iterations between those two. Okay, so here's my backstory with Grease. So because I was in this dancing school, people would call the studio and say, oh, we need 12 kids for The King and I. I'd be, pick me. We need 2 kids for South Pacific. Pick me. So I became part of the Chicago theater system, and when I was 15, I did a production of The Boyfriend at Hull House. Really successful with Bob Sickinger, and there was a guy in the group named Jim Jacobs.
Of course.
And we bonded, we became real friends. I mean, I was 10 years younger than he was, but he got this great Chicago energy, and we just really became friends. He called me a couple years later and he said, Henner, I've written this show, it may never get off the ground. We're gonna perform it in a converted trolley barn. It's about the kids I went to high school with. I want you to be in it, and it's called Grease. So the first day of rehearsal, he passed out 2 stacks of papers like this. One of them was scenes, and then the other one was songs. And there were 37 songs in the first act alone. And so the original Summer Nights was Foster Beach. Oh, on Foster Beach, when you walk by the water, you can see a sign. It's our summer Valentine. And that became Summer Nights. Time passed, and Jim Jacobs called me to be in the national company. By that time, I had seen the show. I loved it. It's a whole story, but anyways, I ended up doing the national company with Jeff Conaway playing Danny Zuko, Johnny Travolta playing Judy, Jerry Zaks playing Kanicki, Judy Kay playing Rizzo. Rehearsing with us for the London company was Richard Gere.
Oh my God.
So, I just never looked back, and so it just became part of my life. Then I did on Broadway as well.
Talk about what it was like to audition and get the role of Elaine on Taxi, how that was for you, what that felt like, and just everything, what that experience was.
Well, first of all, I was way too young for the part. They wanted somebody who was a 35-year-old Italian New Yorker. But Joel Thurm, the casting director, kept bringing me back because he said, she's got the right energy for the guys. She could be one of the guys, but she could still hold her own, her femininity, and you believe her as someone who aspires to be in the art world, et cetera, et cetera. So they kept bringing me back, and they kept saying, well, she's too young, she's too young. So then they said, well, we'll give her 2 little kids. So.
And we'll be back with more on Hollywood and Ivy after this. And we're back on Hollywood and Ivy. Today we're visiting with Marilu Henner. So Marilu, what's interesting about Taxi is it started out as a vehicle for Judd Hirsch.
They wanted to do a show about guys, and they said, we'll have 1 female in it. So they knew they were going to do about the cab company, et cetera. And actually, there were other actors that they thought of. So it was always, it became Judd Hirsch in Taxi.
That's why I asked,
mainly because of Del Vecchio, and that was a good negotiation by his agent.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't that they set out to do a vehicle for Judd.
Gotcha. And that turned into some,
guy.
The cast was so eclectic. You guys were amazing.
Totally. It was one of the few shows where you could take any 2 people and make a show out of them.
Right. One of the things that's amazing about Taxi is the theme by Bob James. I find it very peaceful and kind of
beautiful,
relaxing to listen to.
At the time, you had things like Happy Day, Happy Days, or Schlemiel, Shemaza.
That's right, Laverne and Shirley.
Or Come and Knock on Our Door.
That's right.
And just all of a sudden, because that was the lineup, all of a sudden, like,
so different, and crossing across the bridge and all that, just everything. And that Night, Mr. Walters.
That's Tony Danza in the car.
Wow, it is?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Little known trivia.
So after Taxi, you were in a show called Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds, which I love the plot of that show. He's a former Steeler. How did you, and I think Burt called you to be in that personally?
I worked with him 4 times, and then he called me. He said, I want you to play my wife on Evening Shade. And that was my 5th job with him, and I got to spend 4 years playing his wife.
That had an amazing cast. Ozzie Davis was on that show.
A
Charles
master
Durning,
class
right?
every day.
The movie L.A. Story is brilliant, and the scenes that you are profiled in are probably some of the best scenes in the movie because at the very beginning, when you're riding in the car together and it's the first day of spring, load the gun, and you're asking about, do bullets go stale? No, it's not like milk.
Bullets go bad. That was,
right.
The thing about working with Steve is you can ad-lib all you want. And so most of the lines that you're quoting, I'm doing 30-minute lips, you know, things like that. They're all ad-libs. But the one thing that people always mention about my part in LA Story is the whole point system.
Oh, yes.
When I talk about it, I did that at a rehearsal with just Steve and me. And he said, I'm not putting it in the script, because I did it as an ad-lib during our rehearsal. He said, I'm not putting it in the script, just do it on the day. And if you look at everybody's faces, they're like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's so spontaneous. Absolutely. Turn around and then, and the part about
gone.
Yes, you're practicing the art of conversation.
Yes, right.
Yes. The best part is when he asks, you've been having an affair for how long? And you said 3 years. You've been cheating on me since the 80s? Brilliant.
With Kevin Pollak, who's now on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, playing opposite my best friend, Caroline Aaron.
Right. Now, what was that like working with Steve Martin in that whole time? Because
my
LA
gosh.
Story is an answer to a movie called New York Stories, which had come out, and very different, and it's kind of the essence of Hollywood and Ivy because you were in it. You're from Chicago.
But also, also Steve's from this area. He's from Orange County.
Yeah, he used to work at Disneyland.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Knott's Berry Farm.
Right.
Yes.
Very good. So, do you have a specific memory of Steve Martin's brilliance, his writing, anything he
Everything
said?
that he does. And he, you know, I have a lot of energy and I talk a lot. So, you know, and Steve's very quiet if you ever meet him. And we were always having lunch together and he was always bringing me to lunch. And I said, are you sure I'm not talking too much? He said, no, I'm glad.
I can have the conversation off.
Yeah.
Right.
But we used to play Boggle all the time. And he's just a great guy. I love him. He's one of my favorite people I've ever worked with in my life. And he's got the most beautiful hands I've ever seen on anybody. No, I mean, I blew a take in the car. You were talking, the first time I saw his hands, I was like, oh my gosh, his hands are so beautiful.
Oh, wow.
He should be like a painting, you know, like a sculpture.
So you were on Dancing with the Stars. You you stole my thunder because when you were rehearsing and performing on Dancing with the Stars, it was 2016, and it wasn't just 2016, Marilu. It was October of 2016 when history is being made. So I did a show at Joe's place, Joe Montaigne, our producer's place, and we had an edict that came down about the Cubs better win this year. He came on as Fat Tony. I like to think that your karma of being on Dancing with the Stars, we all did it together.
Gave it the energy.
Yes.
You know what's interesting about the World Series is my brother-in-law had gone to the World Series when he was 12. So he was,
in 1945?
The 1945 World Series, he had gone to it. Yes, but they didn't win. But 1945, and so then he went to the Cubs in 2016.
Oh, wow. And what did he tell you about it?
He said incredible. It was like, I didn't get to go because I was too busy, you know, in triage, taping my ribs and my feet and everything else, doing Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, gotcha, right.
Like, in fact, we had four of my siblings went, and my brother-in-law, and my other brother-in-law, and my nephew. They all went. They went to the World Series.
Do you know the story about Joe Montaigne being offered tickets by the Cubs to go to Game 7?
No.
The Cubs offered Joe to fly out to go to Game 7, and he said, I could just imagine how awful it would be to have the Cubs lose the World Series, and also I'm in Cleveland. So Joe said no, but you know, everything worked out. So
everything worked out.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with more on Hollywood and Ivy after this. So you have two sons.
I have two sons, incredible sons.
Yeah.
Both named after my parents. My older son is Nicholas, and my mother's Greek name was Nicoletta, Nicoletta Kalogeropoulos, and so he's Nick.
Sure.
And Joey was named after my father, Joe Henner. And Nick is just turned 28, and he is. He just directed his first feature.
Congratulations.
And it's doing so well. I mean, it isn't out yet, but it's for Will Ferrell's company. And
how
Will
great
loves
is that?
it. And my younger one, who's 26, he wants to be a comedy writer, and he's brilliant, and he is an international bridge player as well. And he became a life master at 24. He was one of the top bridge players under 25 for a very long time.
Right.
Now he's 26. And he plays with all these women, so he's writing a script. I don't want anybody to steal the idea, but he's writing a script called Bridge Gigolo.
Did they play Little League growing up? Did you make them be Cub fans? Were they forced to be Cub fans?
Well, they were kind of forced to be Cub fans.
That's great. That's what you should do.
Yeah, force the kids.
Yeah.
But we played baseball all the time in the summer because at this empty lot near us. But the boys, they played Little League I guess you didn't call it little. I guess you,
Oh, yeah,
you could
yeah,
call
yeah,
it.
yeah.
At, you know, the parks
Right.
at Beeman Park. Do you know Beeman?
I do not.
Okay, it's in Los Angeles. So they played, and my son Joey was like amazing pitcher. Like
great.
He was the sportsy one. On their sports cards,
Uh-huh.
you know, Joe would have like awesome batter, you know, great pitcher.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever, point guard for basketball.
Sure.
And Nick would have like awesome dancer.
Right.
He loves to read.
Yes.
Girls love him. You know,
That's
things
great.
like that.
You got eclectic, very right?
Eclectic.
Very nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. So you have an amazing memory. It's well known. It's documented. What is it actually called? And you're one of, I believe, 6 or 8 people that has actually been classified with this.
Well,
Is that
it's a few
correct?
more people, but
Right.
not that many more, especially in the upper
Right.
percentile.
I think I saw something about 10 years ago where it was 6
Yeah.
or 8 at the time.
But
you
it
have an
was-
amazing memory.
Yeah, it's called HSAM, Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory.
Gotcha.
And basically what it means is that we remember like every day of our lives.
Right.
The sad part for me with other people that I've learned about memory is that most people remember only 8 to 11 events within any given year of their lives.
Right.
And so to me, that's like, well, what about all the other
Right.
days?
That's
you
like
know?
a half of a percentage point to you.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
crazy.
So,
Wow. Amazing.
yeah.
When did you first discover you had that, and what was the effect on your family, friends, teachers? How did they?
Well,
you know?
first of all, everybody's got something in my family, and this
Right.
is mine. And you know, I was a good student, but it wasn't just because of memory. You know, you grow up in a big Catholic family, you become very competitive with one another. And as the third child, I had a sister 10 years older, sister 4.5 years old, 5 years, like in grades, 10 years ahead of me in school, 5 years ahead of me in school. So I learned my multiplication before I
Yeah.
even went to kindergarten, you know, because my other sisters were learning what they were learning. And so I just, even as a 6-year-old, people would say, what's with that kid and her memory? Because it
Wow.
was just, I would just
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
everything, you know,
Right.
details, you know. And so I've written a book about it.
What's it called?
It's called Total Memory Makeover. It's one of the 10 books I've written.
Right.
And it's like, and I want to help people with their memory. I do one-on-one memory sessions with people.
Great is
I
that?
do seminars with people. I offer myself a lot of times for charities where people will pay like a charity, and I'll
Right.
say, oh, well, I'll kick in a memory session if you, you know, like
that
an
great?
auction item
Yeah.
or something like that.
you
Because
go
I
to-
love working with people.
Did you work with kids at schools, maybe
Kids
with
at school. I
helping
go
them with
around-
math or history or anything, just how to use their memory, how to use their own brain, perhaps?
Totally, because
Yeah.
you use your own life to
Right.
like, you know, to use your own life to
Yeah.
relate to other things. Because as I say to people, everything you've ever been through is on your emotional hard drive. It makes you behave in certain ways anyway,
Right.
and so you don't even know why you might have a visceral reaction to somebody.
Exactly.
You know, and so it's like, oh, or you'll walk into a place and like, oh, that smell reminds me of my grandmother's, you know, or something. So it's firing all senses, and it's also trying to figure out. The way I describe it is that everybody has what I call a primary track. It's like in the jigsaw puzzle of your life. What are the hard-edged pieces by which you can interlock the other memories?
Yeah.
And also, everyone has a dominant sense. Everyone is a sight, sound, touch, taste, or smell person.
Right.
So if you can figure out, you know, your primary track
right.
and your dominant sense, you can figure out how you receive, retain,
Yes.
and then retrieve memories. But it's definitely been nature nurture. I was
Right.
born with something unusual, but I loved to exercise it.
You worked on your gift.
I worked on my
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah. Outstanding.
I consider. I'm glad you call it a gift because sometimes people call it a condition, and I always say no, it's a gift.
Right.
It's a real
yeah.
gift.
Okay, so I had November 2nd, 2016.
November 2nd, 2016. I know it was a Wednesday. I guess that was the World Series, the win.
There you go, right?
I was wearing. I told you. Remember, I told you I was wearing a blue dress for my samba, and that's what I was working on.
So you do remember November 2nd?
I do remember. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know exactly where I was. Yeah.
And what do you remember about perhaps that game or any memories of the highlights?
Oh, no,
remember about you learning the Cubs win the World Series. What's your memory of that?
No. I was in a major rehearsal and could only take a few minutes
Right.
out to do that. So.
Sure. So what was that like? How was it? What were those few minutes like? Were they, you know,
Yeah,
did you think about
couldn't
your
believe
family?
it. You
And,
just, everybody was like texting, screaming at each other. Nobody could believe it. I was with Derek Huff, and the two of us were like hugging and
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. Well, I was hugging him because I'm the Cubs fan, but yeah, I hugged him anyway.
Right.
But yeah, so it was, you know, it was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because you know, you always thought the crybaby Cubs and this and that. And the crazy thing is that Ernie Banks, who had a better record than so many of the big hitters, you know, but he was so like lean and he was a shortstop.
He had amazing wrists. His wrists were so big and strong.
And so, yeah. And so I don't think he ever got his due.
He never did.
And the thing, exactly, he never was in a game.
Yeah.
And the thing about Ernie Banks, too, is that you always waited to hear what his little rhyme was going to be.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, what was it? The Cubs are alive in 65
right.
or something. The Cubs will be great in 68 or whatever.
Absolutely. The Cubs are a great machine in 2016. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. What was your family and relatives lifelong, especially your brother's reaction to that when that happened? Did he call you and had to share it with you during rehearsal?
They were at the game like 2 days before.
Right.
And they couldn't believe it, or I guess, someday that week. I was in Dancing with the Stars more. But nobody could believe it.
Right.
Everybody was just so excited, and we felt like, it broke the curse.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you talk to David Ross and give him any tips about going on Dancing with the Stars? Because he's the Cubs manager. He was also on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. I thought he did a great job.
Right.
He was the first, I think he was he was the first one. He was adorable. Everybody really just loved him too.
Right.
You know,
and
so comfortable.
I went to the ring night at Wrigley Field when all the Cubs got and they raised the banner. And what we did, you'll like this, the Jumbotron at Wrigley Field was showing David Ross performing in Dancing with the Stars. And so they held up the game to watch David Ross perform in Dancing with the Stars.
As they should have.
Yes,
yes.
Because
they're both,
Right.
No, it's great. I mean, you know what I love about the Cubs is that you don't have to win the games for people to show up. You know, you don't have to win
the experience.
It's the experience. It's being part of it. It's,
you
know, Wrigley Field and how beautiful it is and everything else.
Yeah.
You know, it's that whole feeling. It's the feeling of being there, the smell of the grass, and just the whole feel of Wrigley Field and what it looks like and how right there is the neighborhood. My brother was talking about the fact that, you know, only in Wrigley Field and in Candlestick Park can you catch a ball outside.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
really,
that goes over the, that goes over the, right,
yeah.
Absolutely, wonderful. And it's all the colors of nature too, Marilu. I said this to Adrian Zmed, that Wrigley Field is really an homage to another great Chicagoan, Frank Lloyd Wright, because you have all the colors of nature with the ivy green, the blue skies, the white clouds, even the colors of the bleachers, and it all works, it all fits right in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty special.
Absolutely.
Very special.
Well,
When are you going to the next game?
So I think that next year we're going to have Sweet Day at Wrigley Field, so please come and join us.
Sweet, like you have to be sweet to go, or you're
of
eating
course,
sweets?
We're going to be in a suite at the stadium.
Oh!
So they talked about that.
That's sweet. I'll
Having
go to that
Joe
one.
come and all the, you know, have the Bob Odenkirk and
Right.
Gary Cole and Gary Sinise, all of us go. So
I'm there.
Please
You need
come. Absolutely.
You need some, you know, Femina. That's great.
That'll be great.
Bonnie Hunt and I'll come.
Anyways, it's been wonderful having you. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to tell you, we do not have a guest book for you to sign. We do have a guest ball, though. So I'm gonna throw this to you right now. All right, let's make it a close.
I'll take it.
Oh, great catch.
Okay.
And then I got a.
Let's see.
Where's the pen here?
I know exactly where I'm going to sign
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Lovely.
Yes, with that, you know, Palmer Method Catholic school handwriting that I have from growing up in Chicago, St. John Berkman's, Madonna High School, University of Chicago.
Well, Marilu Henner, it's been wonderful having you today on Hollywood and Ivy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and as always, go Cubs.
Yes, go Cubs.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time on Hollywood and Ivy, where Sunset Boulevard meets Addison and Clark.
Baseball season's underway. Well, you better get ready for a brand new day. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They're singing, go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. Go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. Go Cubs, go!
Hollywood and Ivy was filmed live at Universal Studios in Hollywood, California.
Hollywood and Ivy is a presentation of Brigham Avery Productions.